Heart at the Hazbin Hotel, Chapter 20. I'm not sure what this chapter will be, but it might contain a lot of fluff. Some sexual stuff might be talked about. They're just slowly becoming more and more as it continues. For purposes, I will not be reading those scenes because they can be a little much. But if you want to read the chapter, I will post it. But for now, for this to be posted online or on YouTube, wherever I decide to put this, it will not be said. So I apologize if some things are missed out. Anyway, let's get on with this chapter. Chapter 20. Making Up for Lost Time. Heart's Point of View. It's been a month since Alistair came back into my life, as well as saving me from the extermination. It's the happiest I've been in a long time. I felt like myself again. It was nice to have Alistair back. The first few days, I didn't want him to leave my side. That day we got back home, Lizzie kicked him out. But he became a shadow and snuck back inside through my window. He would lay in bed with me as I slept, having his arms wrapped around me, and I felt safe and protected again. I almost felt like a kid who didn't want to let go of their parents. I'd have my hands fisted into his shirt and my face in his chest. When the morning came, he would sneak back out my window and then show up at the front door, acting like he left and came back the next day, when secretly, he didn't. Some days, I had nightmares. They didn't want to go away. Mostly it was that night during the extermination. What would have happened if Alistair didn't show up? If he showed up, but not in time. He would show up, but he would also die. It was all too much for me. Alistair would shake me awake from them, and then I'd cry. He would bring me closer to his body, and then hum me a song to calm me those nights. It worked. My breathing calmed. I stopped crying, and I just listened to him hum, and then drifted back off to sleep as he held me. The nightmare wouldn't come back after that. Lately, they've gotten better, and they seem to go away, but I was still glad to have Alistair around to make it better. I was still unsure what to do, where to go. Alistair didn't hint towards anything of what he was doing. I felt like it was just because he was fine with the current situation, or just thinking of what to do himself. Either way, I was in no hurry. I was enjoying the current moments. We were also getting more feely with each other the last month as well. Alistair was the one calling the shots on it, of course. I think after he did it the first time, he found out that he really enjoyed it, because I was into it. It always happens during our little random makeout sessions, which just added fuel to the fire. Like that first day he came back, he would take my breasts into his hand and gently squeeze it. Eventually he went to both and held one in each hand. The feeling that went through me I couldn't even describe. He then got more adventurous when he decided to snake his hands under my shirt, only staying around my stomach or my back. He seemed to enjoy the feeling of my skin under his fingers. Of course, being the serial killer he was, I knew he enjoyed the feeling anyway, but I made the assumption that it was different for him, because it was me. He wanted to make me feel good, but not put me in pain. I knew he never wanted to hurt me. Plus, the feeling of his long, clawed fingers going lightly against my skin gave me goosebumps. The feelings were just making me tingle all over and just want more. These were all steps he was taking. I was proud of him that he was going as far as he did. I couldn't wait for that day when he would let me touch him in return. I had to keep my hands to myself, and it was very difficult. Overall, I was just content with what I had. I went to the hotel again to visit Charlie and everyone else. It was nice to be back to seeing them again, without having to worry about me freaking out every time I went to the hotel. I'm sure Charlie was glad to see me happy and chipper again. Angel always seemed in a better mood as well, but I knew it was because of Russ. The two invited Alistair and I out for a double date, but I told them I wanted to wait a little more until things started to get back on track. They were okay with that answer. Plus, I had to ask Alistair if he would be okay with it. In the meantime, Lizzie even made a new friend, if you want to call him that. Although everyone in her gang was all cool with each other, she was putting him through these tests to see if he would be accepted into their small gang. Initiation, in a way. I only met him once when Lizzie brought him over to meet me. I was glad Alistair was there, because the guy was a little intimidating to me. But I could tell he knew who Alistair was, because he didn't want to look at him too much. His name was Coda. He was a wolf demon with more humanoid features, but he had the ears and the tail. He was mainly an asshole. So that meant Lizzie got along with him just fine in their gang. Lizzie probably didn't want to admit it to herself, but she seemed to like him. Knowing her, though, she would brush it off if I said anything. Today, I was going to try and get some answers out of Alistair. I wanted to see if he had any plans of going to the hotel. I wanted to go back, but I wasn't going to unless he was. I needed to find out. Unfortunately for myself, Alistair had to leave my side, and I was home with Lizzie and her new friend Coda. I begged him not to leave me with them, but he insisted that he had something important he needed to attend to. I understood, since he still technically was an overlord and had things to do, but I still didn't want him to leave me right now. Coda sat on a chair across from me, just staring, while Lizzie was in her room getting ready. His eyes on me just made me uncomfortable, especially since he wasn't much of a talker. We sat in silence for a moment until I thought of something to ask him, at least. "So, Coda, how long have you been down in hell for?" I asked to break the silence. "Since 1974, he answered with a gruff tone. I nodded. "You enjoy it?" "No. But it can be fun when you're beating the shit out of someone." Coda went and put a fist into one hand to pretend to punch as he looked at me. I gulped. "Well, that's interesting. As long as you're enjoying yourself," I said nervously. Coda huffed. "Sure. Now can you stop asking me these stupid questions?" he said as he sat back in the chair. He turned his head away from me. I closed my mouth. He obviously didn't want to talk to me and probably just wanted to beat the shit out of me instead. I soon heard Lizzie walk into the room and then turn to Coda. "Are you ready to go?" "Pin ready," Coda said as he stood up from the chair. Lizzie looked at me. "I'll be back later, all right? If you go out, let me know," she told me. "I will," I answered. The two then headed out the door, but Coda gave me one last snarl before walking out and closing the door behind him. I put my face in my hands. "Alistair, where are you?" I sighed. I stood up and went to my room, closing the door behind me. I went to my bed, grabbing my Alistair doll that was on my pillow, and laid down in bed with it close to my chest. At least I got some comfort from it. Plus, I've been having Alistair hold it now and then. It would smell like him afterwards. I laid there for a while, waiting for him to return. I knew I shouldn't worry about him, but I couldn't help it. That, and part of me almost felt like I had a separation anxiety disorder or something. Ever since Alistair got back, I didn't want to be without him. Not for long. I always wanted him with me. I was just afraid he was going to leave me again, even though I know that he wouldn't do that. My mind was almost like a constant battle. I just wanted him to hold me, to know I was safe, and he would be here with me. I soon felt a presence behind me. I knew who it was as I felt a static fill the air. Alistair was back. I didn't turn to face him. I wanted to see what he would do. I felt him close to my ear. His breath brushed against my hair as he leaned down and placed a kiss on top of it. I then felt a hand being placed on my arm as he rolled me towards him, and I laid on my back. I looked up at him into his crimson eyes, and he looked down at me. "I was wondering when you would be back," I said as I reached up and placed a hand on his cheek. "I told you I'd be back soon, darling," Alistair said as he placed his hand on top of mine. "I know, but he left me alone with that new friend of Lizzie's. He was freaking me out, just looking at me and stuff. I felt he wanted to beat me up," I said nervously as I took my hand back. Alistair smiled less, not showing his teeth. "I'm sorry I left you in that situation, my dear. I'll leave a shadow behind next time if you ever are alone with him." "Thank you," I sighed in relief. "I have something I want to show you today," Alistair told me. "Is it a surprise?" I wondered. "It is. I hope you don't mind that it's on the border of town, though," Alistair asked me. "I don't mind at all," I answered with a smile. When do you want to leave? As soon as I'm done with you, Alistair said in a deep, seductive tone as he stood up straight and took his jacket off and laid it on the floor. My eyes went wide as a shiver went up my spine at his tone. Him saying that meant one thing. Skipping. Unskip. I think this is something we'll have to need to explore more into, Alistair said with a devilish smile. Oh, God, Al, don't leave me like this, I said between breaths. I'm sorry, my love, but I have to, he told me, but I could hear the disappointment in his voice. I let out a groan. Fine. Maybe I'll do more next time. I promise. Remember, little bit at a time, Alistair told me. Little bit at a time, I repeated. Alistair got off me and reached down to pick up his jacket from the floor. I sat up in bed and fixed my shirt. My mind and heart were racing. He was getting braver each time, and I liked that. But I hated that I had to leave unsatisfied. I always remembered to not be too mad, though. He was doing what he was feeling comfortable with. Although I wish he would start letting me touch him in return, but I knew that he was getting used to me first before he'd let me get to him. Alistair reached a hand out to me. Shall we be on our way? I nodded and took hold of his hand, and he helped me up from the bed. I grabbed my phone, sent Lizzie a text that I was heading out with Alistair, and we headed out of the house. Alistair reached over and grabbed my hand and laced his fingers with mine. So, do I get a hint of what the surprise is? I asked as we walked. No, it's 100% going to be a surprise, Alistair answered. I let out a huff. You're no fun. Alistair let out a chuckle. Don't worry, my dear. You'll definitely be surprised. You said it was on the border of town? I made sure. Correct. I wanted to be kind of secluded and private, Alistair told me. Well, I can't wait then, I said with a smile. We continued to walk, and Alistair was the one leading the way. We walked past the hotel, but we didn't stop. I didn't feel like it until after we were done where we were going. We continued to walk, and it felt like 15 minutes from the hotel. We were heading towards a forest of trees. The leaves were brown and red, and the road turned to dirt. Not too much further, Alistair said. We just have to follow this road. I felt worried now, going into the woods. I stopped and just looked down the road, and it seemed to go into darkness. Alistair stopped when I did and looked back at me. Al, I'm scared, I told him with shakiness to my voice as my ears went flat against my head. Alistair just gave me a small smile. Don't be scared, darling. Nothing will harm you. This area is safe. I was hesitant for a moment. I trust you. I continued to let Alistair lead the way and into the dirt path. I wrapped my arms around his to feel more comfortable and closer to him, my ears close to my head and my tail close to me. Even though the forest looked dark, once we got inside, it wasn't as bad as it looked. I loosened my grip on Alistair's arm a little and looked around. Soon we reached a gate. It was big and blocked off the dirt road. The gate was probably made of steel, and I noticed that there was a shape of a deer's head designed into it. Alistair waved his hand, and it started to open. Once past the gate, I saw a house at the end of the dirt path. My ears went up. It was big and looked to me made of wood. We continued to walk towards it, and Alistair led me up to the front door. Alistair, what is this place? I finally asked. My dear, this would be my home, Alistair answered. My eyes went wide. I looked at the house, then back to him. You have a house? I wondered in surprise. Why, of course! Why wouldn't I? Alistair exclaimed with excitement. It's just, you never mentioned it to me, I said as I looked down. I did that on purpose. I wanted it to be a surprise. He took my chin between his fingers, and I looked up at him again. I had the room in the hotel so I would be closer to the work. I would visit my home every now and again, though. He let go of my chin. I looked around the area and said, It's very secluded and private. I like it. I started to wag my tail. Alistair smiled at my reaction. Shall we head inside? Alistair gestured to the door. Absolutely, I said excitingly. Alistair unlocked the door and we walked inside. I walked in and the doors opened to a giant foyer that went all the way up to the ceiling and a chandelier hanging from the top. A giant window was on the back wall and you could look out into the forest. A fireplace was in the middle with a couch and a few chairs in front of it. There was also a set of French doors that went out onto a wooden porch as well. It was a very open area, very bright. To the right was a doorway, and I looked inside to see a giant kitchen. By that doorway was a set of stairs that went up to the second level. To my left was another doorway, and there was a hallway that stretched out. My tail wagged with excitement. This place was amazing. I felt Alistair reach down and grab my hand. "Come on, let me show you around." I was bouncing with excitement as Alistair led me through the house. He showed me around the kitchen and then took me down the hallway where an extra bedroom was, a restroom, and at the end was some glass doors that led into a greenhouse. Alistair told me he grew a lot of stuff and used it when he cooked. He preferred to grow it and then buy it in a store. He then took me up the stairs to the second level. Up there was a study. It was filled with shelves of books as well as one of those big old-time radios. It just looked so comfy. There was also a master bathroom that connected to the master bedroom. Alistair led me into the bedroom and I was amazed by the size of it. Pictures hung on the wall. They looked to be old and they were pictures of cities and forests. There was even a stuffed deer head hanging by the doorway. I saw an old record player on top of one of the dressers as well. I stood in the middle of the room and turned back to Alistair. "Your house is amazing," I told him. Alistair smiled at me. "I'm glad you think so. I actually built it." "You did? That's so cool," I said with excitement. "This is also where I stay as well when I was away," Alistair said sadly. "I knew you wouldn't think to look for me here." My ears went down slightly at his statement. "Oh, well, that's good, I guess." I looked away from him, saddened as I thought of that time. I honestly didn't want to think of it. Not right now. Alistair walked up to me and wrapped his arms around me. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to bring up bad memories," Alistair stated. "Although I stayed alone in this house for many years, I didn't mind that." Alistair took one of his hands and placed it on the back of my head. "Now, I've never felt more alone. Those days I stayed here were the loneliest I ever felt." I looked up at him. "Al," I whispered sadly. He looked down at me. "I don't want to feel that way ever again," he told me softly. I took my right hand and placed it on his cheek. "And you don't have to. You have me. We have each other." Alistair placed his other hand and placed it on top of mine that laid on his cheek. "My little wolf, I have something I'd like to ask you." I heard a gentleness in his voice. "Anything," I responded eagerly with my ears to the side. I didn't know what he was going to say to me. I was worried about what he was going to say. My heart was racing. Alistair took a pause as he looked down at me with loving eyes. "Will you move in with me? Live with me here? We can still go to the hotel and help Charlie. We can go every day. I won't mind. I just want to be with you. Just you and me. Here." He took my hand away from his cheek and just caressed it with his fingers. I was shocked, my ears going up in surprise. I wasn't expecting that to be asked. Move in with Alistair? I honestly didn't even need to think about it. I would be alone with him with no one to bug us. No guests or workers at the hotel, nor my sister at home. We were secluded in this forest, away from others. That's how I liked it. I smiled big up at Alistair. "I'd love to move in with you. I couldn't ask for anything better." Alistair smiled so big, it was almost scary. "I was hoping you'd say that." Alistair took my hand he was holding and laid a kiss on top of it. "I wouldn't want to be anywhere else, Al. With you is where I belong and where I will stay," I told him lovingly. Alistair laid his forehead against mine. "I love you," Alistair said. I was so filled with content at the moment. "I love you too," I said in return, my tail wagging. Alistair leaned down and kissed me on the lips softly. The kiss had so much love behind it, I could tell. It just made my heart explode with happiness. We pulled apart. Can I move in as soon as I can? As soon as you want, my dear. I can even have your stuff here with a snap of my fingers, Alistair said, holding one hand out with his fingers together like he was ready to snap. I let out a chuckle. I should tell Lizzie first before I do anything. Alistair put his hand back down. I guess that's reasonable. How about we stop at the hotel and let Charlie know? I suggested. It would be nice to work back at the hotel. Alistair nodded and we made our way down and out of the house. We walked down the dirt road again. I was skipping as we went. I'll miss you singing almost every day, back when you worked at the restaurant, Alistair told me. I turned around and looked at him, still skipping as I went. I can sing for you, I said with a smile. You can have your own private concert, I chuckled. Alistair smirked. I wouldn't mind that at all. I laughed. I know. We got out of the small woods and back into the city and onto the paved streets. We made our way to the hotel. I had stopped skipping and stood by Alistair's side again, my hand wrapped into his as we walked. Within 15 minutes, we stood at the door of the hotel. We walked in and looked around to see if anybody was there. My ears perked up to listen for anything. I then spotted Charlie sitting on the couch by the fireplace as she read a magazine. Charlie, I called out so I didn't frighten her. She turned her head and looked towards us with a smile. Ah, Hart, Alistair, it's good to see you guys. She stood up from the couch and walked over to us. What brings you guys here today? She asked. We were walking by and wanted to stop in, I answered. Oh, where were you going, if you don't mind me asking? Charlie wondered. Well, we were actually at Alistair's house. He wanted to show it to me, I said with a smile, my tail wagging again at the thought. Charlie looked surprised and looked at Alistair. I didn't know you had a house. That's because it's something I kept secret, Alistair told her. Charlie's smile got bigger. Can I see it? In due time, Alistair responded and patted the top of her head. Charlie frowned. Fine. Charlie, there's something else I wanted to tell you while we were here, I started. She turned to me with a look of confusion. Oh, what is it? I reached over and grabbed Alistair's hand for comfort. He didn't pull away. Charlie, I'm going to be moving in with Alistair. He asked me and I said yes. Charlie let out a squeal of excitement. Aw, Hart, that's great. I'm glad you guys are taking that step. I looked at her confused as I had one ear up and one ear down. You aren't mad? Charlie still had her smile on her face. Mad? Why would I be mad? Because I wouldn't be staying here at the hotel, I said, looking down and my ears going back. Charlie placed a hand on my shoulder. Hart, it's fine. I understand you have things going on. Plus, I know you want to focus on your relationship right now to make up for lost time. I think moving in with Al is a great idea. I still plan to come to help, though, I added quickly, my ears shooting back up. I want to come back to help you, at least to come every other day. That would be fine. I love that idea. I miss having you guys around, Charlie said with soft eyes. I miss you too, Charlie, I told her. We stayed at the hotel for a little while longer, talking to Charlie and some of the others. I was hoping to see Angel Dust, but Charlie told me that he was over Russ's place today. Eventually, we said our goodbyes and headed home to see if Lizzie was back. We walked down the streets again, hand in hand. It was nice to walk in the city and not be stared at by every demon like a piece of meat. Alistair was the one that scared them away. I was so happy to have him back with me. We got back to the house and walked inside. Lizzie, I called out. I got no answer. Lizzie had still not come home. I hoped she was okay. Lizzie, I called out again, just in case. I heard nothing. I turned around to face Alistair. It looks like she isn't home, I shrugged. Want me to send a shadow to find her? Alistair suggested. Maybe, just in case. I know she's probably okay, but I need to be sure, I told him. Alistair snapped his fingers. They'll find her. I watched as the shadow snuck out the door. I sighed. I was hoping she'd be here. Oh well, I guess I can start packing. I headed towards my room. As I got to the hallway, Alistair grabbed my hand, though. I looked up at him, and he just looked at me with what seemed like a loving gaze and a seductive smile. "I have another idea in mind right now," Alistair whispered as he pulled me closer to him. "Al, what if Lizzie comes home and she walks in on us?" I asked quietly, my ears going back slightly and concerned. "She won't," Alistair answered. Alistair placed a hand on my cheek and then leaned down to place a kiss on top of mine. He kissed me softly and gently. I kissed him back, my ears slowly going back up. I could only imagine what he had planned for me now. It made me excited. Would he continue from earlier? Lucifer, I hoped so. Alistair then pushed me up against the wall. He pressed his body close to mine. He stopped the kiss and then started to trail small pecks down my neck. He took his hands and laid them on my hips. He slowly rubbed them and then slipped his right hand under my shirt. While I did that, he trailed kisses back up my neck and back to my lips. He slipped his other hand under my shirt and wrapped his arms around me to lay on the back of my wings. He was gliding his fingers lightly over my skin. His claws almost tickled. I got goosebumps all over from the feeling. Alistair stopped the kiss and I managed to catch my breath. He was breathing a little hard as well. "I never realized feeling skin this way felt good," Alistair breathed out. I gave a small chuckle. "You mean not digging in covered in blood?" Alistair let out a radio-sounding laugh then. "Perhaps. I do like that as well, but I would never want to hurt you in that way." I smiled and looked at him lovingly. "I'm not one for pain, but I wouldn't mind a little feel of it when feeling this way with you," I told him shyly. Alistair looked at me confused. "You want me to hurt you?" "No, but I just want you to be a little rough. I'm new to feeling this way. I want to know my limits," I explained. Alistair kept looking at me, concerned. "I'm new to this as well. I don't know how far I will go." "I'm willing to take that chance," I whispered to him as I leaned up and placed a small kiss on his lips. "Okay, if you trust me, I'll trust myself," Alistair said with a small smile. "How about we take this to my bed? It'll be more comfortable," I suggested. Alistair took his hands out from under my skin and grabbed my hand to lead me to the door. I closed the door and locked it behind us. Alistair took off his jacket and dumped it onto the floor, and then took a seat on the bed. Now alone and locked in my room, I felt a little more confident in what I was going to do next. "Mind if I make myself more comfortable?" I asked, looking at Alistair with a seductive tone. I saw a flash of amusement in Alistair's eyes, and he sat up straight. "Be my guest." Skipping. Skip. Done skipping. I had a feeling that what we were doing was over, and it made me sad. But that was something further than what we got before. I got up off Alistair, and he got up from the bed. He left my room and headed to the bathroom to grab something to take care of my marks. I watched him walk, looking at his bare back and that tail of his as it wagged behind him. I could tell he was happy, as I saw it wiggle a little bit. I sat down on the edge of the bed and waited for him to come back. I put my hand to my neck and pulled it away to see the small amount of blood. Alistair returned with a bottle of rubbing alcohol and a cloth. He sat down next to me on the bed. "This'll probably sting a little," Alistair warned as he put a little rubbing alcohol on the cloth. "I can bear it," I told him. Taking the cloth and pressing it against the little marks he left on my back. They did sting, but it wasn't anything I couldn't stand. The marks were not deep, so that was okay with me. He did my whole back and then took it to my neck. I let out a small hiss of pain from it. It was different there. I let Alistair continue. "I would say wait a little longer to put your shirt back on so that there's no blood to get on it," Alistair suggested. "I don't plan on going anywhere else today, so I'll probably just stay home," I said. "I can help you pack. Make it easier to get everything in over my house," Alistair told me. "Yeah, let's get started on that." I smiled at the idea of me living with Alistair now. Lizzie probably won't be home for a little while longer. We started to put some stuff away, or just put it in piles in my room to make it organized. I would go out later for boxes. I left my shirt off as I did so, I was too lazy to put it back on, and I wanted to make sure my marks were closed first before doing so. After a while of doing that, a yawn escaped my lips. "You want to rest for a little while?" Alistair asked me. Alistair had put his shirt back on, but left it unbuttoned. "I think that's a good idea," I said as I put one last thing together. I looked over at Alistair. "Will you stay with me?" "If that is what you wish." Alistair wondered with a slight bow. I nodded. "Always." He stood up straight. "Then I shall stay." I got up from the floor and crawled into bed. "Will you lay with me?" "Of course," Alistair answered me with a smile. He got into bed next to me, and I laid close to him. I put my head on his bare chest and wrapped his arms around me. I held him tight. "I love you, my buck," I said as I breathed out with content. Alistair leaned down and put a kiss on my forehead. "And I love you too, my wolf." Alistair wrapped his arm around my shoulders to bring me closer to him. I never wanted this man to leave my side again. Ever. I don't know what I would do without him now. I needed him, but at the same time, I knew he needed me. I couldn't wait for all that was in store for us in the future. Soon, I escaped into the darkness of sleep. End of chapter 20. It's very hot in here from all the spiciness in this chapter. I hope you enjoyed, because I certainly loved writing it. Until next time, guys, have a good one.